My name is Nadine Coulter. I'm 63 years old. I've spent most of my life behind a bakery counter, measuring flour and pretending I don't mind the silence that comes when family stops calling. That Saturday, Portland felt half asleep beneath a soft drizzle. I went to the market by the waterfront, telling myself I needed fresh apples, though really I just wanted to hear people talking again. The air smelled of coffee, rain, and roasted nuts. I watched vendors setting up bright umbrellas, couples holding paper cups of cider, musicians tuning guitars near the fountain. Ordinary life. Then I saw her. A little girl sat at the fountain's edge, bare feet tucked under her, holding a one-eyed rag doll to her chest. Her hair hung in tangled ribbons, damp from mist. She wasn't begging like the others nearby, just staring at the water as if she were waiting for it to speak. Something in her stillness pulled me closer. I bought a croissant from a nearby stall and crouched beside her. "Here, sweetheart," I said, offering the bag. She lifted her face. Her eyes were dark, too big for her thin cheeks, and just beneath the right one was a small brown mole so familiar it stopped my breath. My son had one exactly like it. The girl blinked, hesitated, then whispered, "Grandma." The word cracked the air open. I froze. The sound of the market fading until only the rain remained, falling softly between us as she waited for me to speak. The girl's name was Lila. She said it softly, as if the word might disappear if spoken too loud. When I asked where her parents were, she pointed toward the river, to the far side of Burnside Bridge. Her hand was small, trembling from cold. I followed her through the drizzle, across puddled sidewalks, and the smell of wet asphalt. The air grew heavier as we moved beneath the bridge. The city sounds cars, laughter. Music faded into a low hum of rain and traffic above our heads. Lila stopped near a cluster of flattened cardboard boxes and plastic crates. There, crouched beside a shopping cart, a man was sorting bottles into a sack. His coat was torn, his hair unwashed, his shoulders thin beneath the fabric. He turned when he heard our footsteps. For a heartbeat, I didn't recognize him. Then something in the line of his jaw, the shape of his mouth, caught the light. My breath caught too. "Ethan, my son." He froze, eyes wide, disbelief flickering across his face before shame buried it. His hands went still over the bottles. "Mom," he murmured, barely audible. "You shouldn't be here." I stepped forward, the ground slick beneath my shoes. "You're alive," I said, though the words sounded strange in my mouth. His gaze fell to the ground. Rain began to fall harder, dripping through cracks above us. Lila pressed closer to his side, clutching the doll. "I'm sorry," he whispered. "It's not what it looks like." I wanted to speak, to ask everything at once: why, how, where she was, but nothing came. I only felt the years of silence between us, heavy as the bridge itself. I sank to my knees in the mud, close enough to see his trembling hands. "Come home," I said. "Both of you." He looked up, rain streaking the dirt on his face. His mouth opened, but no sound came. Then he nodded once, almost imperceptibly, and gathered Lila into his arms as if she were the only thing keeping him upright. The three of us stood there beneath the gray roar of the bridge, the city moving above us, unaware that a mother had just found her son again. That night, the house felt smaller than I remembered. The heater hummed softly, filling the silence that none of us knew how to break. Lila had fallen asleep on the couch, wrapped in one of my old quilts, the faint scent of cinnamon still clinging to it from years past. I sat across from Ethan at the kitchen table, the same table where I once celebrated his birthdays, waited for his college acceptance letter, and later cried over his absence. He kept his eyes on the mug between his hands, turning it slowly, as if the motion could buy him time. "I owe you the truth," he said finally. His voice was rough, unfamiliar. He told me it began with Sophie, her soft voice, her quick smile, the way she could twist any argument into proof that she was the one being hurt. She'd whispered that I was toxic, that I wanted to control him, that I'd never see her as good enough, and he'd believed her. She said we needed distance. He murmured, a new start, somewhere far away from your judgment. He paused, ashamed. She picked Sweden, said she had a cousin there who could help us get visas, work permits. I sold everything I had, my truck, the tools, even Dad's old guitar for the immigration fees. My chest tightened. I could still remember the last message I ever got from him, short, cold, final. We're moving to Sweden. Don't call again. I had read it over and over until the words lost shape, until I convinced myself he was gone for good. Ethan rubbed his hands over his face. A week later, she disappeared, took the money, the documents, even Lila's passport. I called every number I had. Nothing. I went to the police, but they called it a civil dispute and said I didn't have enough to pursue charges. I didn't have enough proof. He looked up at me then, eyes red and wet. I wanted to come home, Mom, but I couldn't. I was ashamed. I didn't know how to face you after what I said. I reached across the table and laid my hand over his. His skin was cold, his knuckles raw. She told you I was toxic, I whispered, and I let her make me disappear. We sat there as the rain pressed gently against the windows. Years of anger, confusion, and silence hung between us like steam rising from the untouched tea. Somewhere in that stillness, I felt something shift. Not forgiveness, not yet, but the faint warmth of something that might grow into it. Steam filled the bathroom as I turned on the tap, the pipes groaning in protest at their sudden use. Lila stood in the doorway, shy and still, her thin arms wrapped around that tattered doll. It's all right, I told her softly. The water's warm. She hesitated, then let me help her climb in. I washed the dirt from her hands and hair, the water turning gray, then clear again. She didn't speak much, only whispered thank you when I wrapped her in a towel that smelled faintly of lavender. For a moment, I caught her reflection in the mirror, cheeks pink from the heat, eyes half closed in comfort. A child should never have to look so old. In the kitchen, I stirred a pot of chicken soup, the same recipe my husband used to praise on cold nights. The scent filled the house, chasing out the musty air of years gone quiet. I set a bowl in front of Ethan without a word. He ate slowly, as if unsure he had the right. When he finished, I went to the hall closet and pulled out the coat that had once belonged to his father, a heavy brown thing, worn at the elbows but still strong. I laid it across the back of his chair. It's late, I said. You'll need it in the morning. He nodded, eyes lowered, voice barely a whisper. Thanks. Mom, later. I made up the couch, but Lila wouldn't sleep alone. She climbed between us, curling small and warm, her breathing even against the quiet house. The rain softened outside, tapping lightly on the windows. For the first time in 3 years, the rooms no longer felt haunted. The house smelled of soup, soap, and bread, ordinary things. Maybe, but tonight they felt holy. The next morning, I woke to the soft sound of rain sliding down the windows and the faint creak of footsteps in the hallway. Ethan was already up, moving quietly through the kitchen, setting aside the empty soup bowls from last night. The scent of fresh coffee lingered in the air, a small, wordless peace. Later that week, I unlocked the doors of Coulter's Sweet Haven for the first time in 3 years. Dust floated in the gray morning light, settling over the old glass cases and wooden shelves. The sign above the door still carried my husband's handiwork. Though the paint had started to peel, I traced the faded letters with my finger, remembering the laughter that used to fill this space. Ethan arrived with Lila in tow, sleeves rolled up, determination written across his tired face. Let's make it shine again, he said. I handed him a rag, and we started from opposite ends of the counter. The rhythm of cleaning became a kind of language between us, quiet, steady, forgiving. By afternoon, the scent of sugar and butter filled the shop again. I baked my first batch of cinnamon rolls while Ethan sanded the counter edges smooth and connected an old laptop I'd kept tucked away. "You should sell online," he said, eyes lighting for the first time in years. "People will find us." When we stepped outside, the rain had stopped. The air smelled clean, sweet, and alive. Lila crouched on the wet sidewalk, drawing crooked hearts and smiling stick figures in chalk. "This one's you." "Grandma," she said, pointing to a figure with a big apron and a messy bun. By the end of the week, neighbors began to stop by again. Mrs. Holloway from down the street, the young teacher from the bookstore, a couple of tourists who remembered the old sign. The laughter returned. Softer now, but real. One evening, as we closed up, Ethan leaned against the doorframe and said, "Feels almost normal, doesn't it?" I nodded, my hands still dusted with flour. The street outside glistened from the rain, lights reflecting in the puddles. For the first time in years, I allowed myself to believe that maybe we were safe again, until a passing customer mentioned, almost casually, that a woman named Sophie Lund had been seen back in Oregon. The afternoon rain had turned steady, streaking the bakery windows like melted glass. I was packing a tray of lemon bars when the sound of tires on wet pavement drew my eyes to the street. A red car, new, shining, out of place among the quiet row of small shops, pulled up right in front of Coulter's Sweet Haven. The door opened, and she stepped out. Sophie. Her hair was perfect, glossy brown waves falling over the shoulders of a red wool coat. She wore heels that clicked sharply against the sidewalk, a sound too confident for someone who had vanished into lies. The bell above the bakery door jingled softly as she entered, bringing the faint scent of expensive perfume that felt like intrusion. Ethan froze at the register. His hands trembled slightly, smudging a receipt. Lila was in the back room, drawing on a paper napkin, humming to herself. Sophie's eyes moved past me, searching. "I came to see my daughter," she said, her tone syrup-sweet, rehearsed. "And to talk about what's mine." "What's yours?" I repeated, my voice calm but tight. She looked around, smiling faintly at the display case. "Half of this, technically, community property. Remember, and I'd like to take Lila for a few days. She deserves her mother." Ethan's breath caught. "You abandoned her," he said quietly. Sophie tilted her head, feigning innocence. "You really want to discuss parenting? Ethan, you raised her under a bridge." The words hit him like a slap, but before he could speak, I stepped forward, placing myself between them. The air smelled of sugar and rain, thick and still. "You left her there," I said evenly. "You don't get to call yourself her mother." For a moment, something flickered in Sophie's eyes, anger, maybe fear, but it vanished behind another smile. She adjusted her coat, her composure precise as glass. "I'll be in touch," she said softly. "You'll hear from my lawyer." Then she turned and walked back into the rain, red coat bright against the gray. The car door shut, tires hissed, and she was gone. Ethan sank into a chair, hands over his face. I stood by the window, watching the taillights fade beyond the drizzle. They looked almost like embers disappearing into fog, but I knew better. Embers don't die quietly. It began with one review, 1 star, written by someone I'd never heard of. Bought cupcakes for my son's birthday. Everyone got sick. By the next morning, there were 5 more. By nightfall, 50. Each sounded rehearsed, like a script copied and pasted. Then came the post that spread everywhere, a photo of a child in a hospital bed. A box from Coulter's Sweet Haven, placed neatly beside him. The caption read, "This is what happens when greed poisons small towns. Orders vanished overnight. Neighbors I'd known for decades avoided my eyes. The scent of sugar and cinnamon still drifted through the bakery, but it no longer felt comforting. It pressed down, like guilt. When Lila came home from school, her shoulders sagged beneath her backpack. "They said we make poison candy," she whispered. Her eyes glistened, brave but breaking. I knelt beside her. "You did nothing wrong," I said, even as my own voice wavered. Ethan sat at the counter, scrolling through comments that multiplied like weeds. "Maybe she wins again, Mom," he said quietly. "Maybe this is all she wanted." I stood there, feeling the words sink into me like stones. Then I turned toward the old phone by the register. When Donovan Reeves answered steady, familiar, I almost cried from relief. I saw the posts. He said, "It's bad. It's her." I managed. "Sophie." He paused, voice calm but sharp with purpose. "Then we start fighting back, outside." Rain hammered the windows. Inside, I felt something steadier rise in me, not anger, not fear, but resolve. The storm could come. We'd face it. Chapter 8. 1 file, 3 proofs. Donovan arrived 2 mornings later, carrying a briefcase that looked older than either of us. Beside him stood a woman in her early 30s, sharp-eyed and calm. "This is Rachel Kim," he said. "She's an associate attorney on my team. She handles the litigation." We sat around the bakery table, the smell of cooling muffins filling the air. Donovan opened his files, spreading papers across the worn wood. "Let's start with what we know," he said. "The reviews, the photo, the custody threat, they all lead back to her." Rachel's voice was steady. "We traced the IP addresses from the fake accounts. They all come from the same location in Salem, an apartment rented under Sophie Lund's maiden name." She slid the printouts toward me. My hands shook as I read them. Donovan continued, pulling out another folder. "The boy in that hospital picture. His mother confirmed he was treated for an asthma attack, not food poisoning. The hospital records match our timeline. We obtained a redacted ER record under subpoena and a sworn declaration from the boy's mother confirming it was an asthma attack, not food poisoning." Rachel nodded. "And the photo was staged with an old candy box she found online. We have timestamps to prove it." Ethan leaned forward, his face pale but determined. "And the business?" Donovan smiled faintly. "The kind of smile that comes only from certainty. She has no claim. The divorce settlement includes a clause she probably forgot about. Sophie signed away rights to any shared assets. The documents notarized and sealed. One line ends her case." For a long moment, none of us spoke. The sound of rain against the glass filled the silence, steady and grounding. I looked at the mountain of papers spread before us, not as evidence of war, but of survival. I wasn't just defending a bakery anymore. I was defending my son's name, his child's peace, and the truth we'd built with our own hands. The fear that had once ruled me began to fade, replaced by something quieter, stronger, a kind of faith that didn't need words. The courthouse smelled faintly of paper and rain. Reporters crowded the hallway, their cameras already flashing before the doors even opened. I sat beside Ethan at the defense table, the sound of rustling coats and whispered gossip filling the room. Across from us, Sophie sat with her lawyer, her red coat draped carefully over the chair like a costume she couldn't quite take off. When the judge entered, the room settled into silence. Sophie's lawyer rose first, speaking with practiced outrage. "My client was deceived, Your Honor. She was denied her rightful share of property and access to her daughter." Sophie dabbed at her eyes with a tissue, tears falling perfectly on cue. Rachel stood next, smooth and steady. "Your Honor," she began, "the evidence will show that Ms. Lund's claims are entirely without merit." Her voice carried a quiet precision that filled the room without ever rising. One by one, She laid out the proof IP addresses linking the fake reviews to Sophie's apartment, the hospital records disproving the poisoning claim, and finally, the divorce agreement. Rachel handed the paper to the clerk, who passed it to the judge. The sound of flipping pages was louder than anything else in the room. This document, Rachel continued, was signed and notarized by Ms. Lund, confirming she waived all future claims to property or income derived from Mr. Coulter's business ventures. The judge adjusted his glasses, reading the line twice before speaking. "Ms. Lund," he said, looking directly at Sophie, "did you sign this of your own free will?" Sophie opened her mouth, but no sound came. Her lawyer leaned toward her, whispering, but she stayed frozen, her face pale beneath the makeup. The cameras clicked like tiny hammers. After a pause, the judge spoke again. "The court finds these claims invalid. This case is dismissed. Furthermore, given the evidence presented, I'm ordering a review for possible fraud and defamation." The gavel struck once, sharp as thunder. Ethan's shoulders sagged. He reached for my hand, gripping it hard, his fingers trembling not from fear, but from release. Outside, the reporters swarmed, but the sound faded behind the courthouse doors. We stepped out into the open air, the rain falling softly on the steps. For a long moment, no one spoke. The city moved around us, ordinary and gray, while the storm that had ruled our lives quietly passed into distance. Weeks passed, and Coulter's sweet haven breathed again. The shelves filled with golden loaves and sugared pastries, the air warm with cinnamon and laughter. The regulars had returned neighbors who now smiled a little longer, asked how Lila was doing, and left tips folded beside thank you notes. Ethan worked behind the counter, sleeves rolled up, sealing boxes for delivery. He moved with quiet purpose, the heaviness gone from his face. Lila sat near the window with a book in her lap, her voice soft as she read aloud, every word bright with new confidence. As the last customer left, I wiped the counters clean, the smell of fresh bread lingering in the air outside. The river shimmered beneath a pale sky. Evening was falling gently over Portland. I stepped onto the porch and lit the old lantern that had hung there since my husband built this shop. Its glow spilled across the steps, steady and gold. I stood there for a long while, watching the light stretch into the drizzle. I used to think love meant holding on. I whispered. Now I know it means lighting the way back. The city murmured beyond the river, alive again, like forgiveness itself.